We are only about 6.5 hours away now from a major change to national immigration policy. This was the scene today in El Paso, Texas, where a wave of migrants are lining up to try to enter the U.S. as Title 42 ends. That is the COVID-era policy that allowed the U.S. to turn away many migrants due to public health concerns. Title 42 ends at midnight. The immigration crisis, of course, isn't limited to our southern border. This impacts the entire country. We know buses of migrants have arrived in New York City, and here in our part of the state, refugee shelters remain overwhelmed. Governor Kathy Hochul issued an executive order 2 days ago to mobilize the National Guard and also provide access to food and supplies. The mayor of Niagara Falls says that is desperately needed in his community. Meanwhile, all shelters in Erie County are full right now, including the largest, Vive. It's part of Jericho Road Community Health Center, which said in a statement that we need a, quote, plan to make space for asylum seekers to thrive in this country. Joining us live right now is the director of Advocacy at Jericho Road, Catharine Grainge. Thanks so much for coming in. You know, it was about a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, that we spoke to the founder of your organization, who told us the Vive shelter was just completely overwhelmed. In the context of what's changing right now at the border, how will that impact Vive and Western New York?
We remain completely overwhelmed at this point. Every day, every week, we're getting dozens of people knocking at our door, and we are already at capacity. We are getting creative with how we can find housing for these folks, but we think that it's going to continue.
On Twitter, you guys shared that, you know, Title 42 is what we're all talking about, right? Title 42 is ending, but we're not just going back to what was known as Title 8, where you can just, like, you know, turn away everybody or not turn away everybody. Explain to us what is going to be happening at the southern border.
Certainly, this feels different. This Title 8 feels different. We have a lot of new procedures and processes that have been introduced, including the circumvention of legal pathways. And what it really does is create extremely hard burdens to overcome when getting to the U.S. and then once here as well. And we are concerned that people are going to be denied asylum, denied refuge when they are truly deserving of it.
We know that this is a very political issue right now. People have very strong feelings on one side or the other. Obviously, you're a group that helps people who are seeking legal asylum, who are in many cases, just horrible circumstances. Others are, you know, obviously concerned that the border is too open, or that we don't have the resources at the southern border to deal with the chaos that's happening there. How concerned are you on the humanitarian side of this with what we're seeing down in Texas and Arizona and California?
No one leaves their home and embarks on this long and dangerous journey to come to a country where the ability to find asylum, to get refuge, to get freedom is a big maybe, unless that home that they're leaving is dangerous and unimaginably so, unless death is knocking at their door. And so I think understanding what an asylum seeker, what a refugee is, really helps us to put this into context and help us understand why we should care about it.
When we talk about the impact here in Western New York and sort of the role that we have kind of played in all of this, for many, many years, we have been a stop for a lot of asylum seekers, right? They would come here to Western New York on their way to Canada. Not everyone. We'll talk about Buffalo as being a welcoming place, but for those folks for whom this used to be a stop, a big change in Canada has altered that. Can you explain that to us?
Certainly. So a couple months at this point, President Biden and Justin Trudeau ended up creating some sort of an agreement where they closed an irregular border crossing. And what that meant was that people who were just stopping in Buffalo to make their way to Canada are now not able to do so. And so they're stuck here, and they're going to pursue asylum claims here in the U.S. It takes very long, it's very hard, but our shelter is overwhelmed because of it.
Yeah, and just to pick up on that, I mean, if we were used to being a place that was a stop and not the long-term destination for someone, and now that has changed, I mean, are we equipped to deal with this right now as a region, not just Vive?
Right, certainly. We are trying to build that infrastructure, and we have some of it because we do accept a lot of refugees here. But what we do need is local and state governments to continue supporting and create substantial ongoing support for these asylum seekers here in Buffalo.
Also, we've done, countless stories over the years about Western New York as being a place that is welcoming to people who are leaving awful circumstances, many of them on the other side of the world. The city of good neighbors is a moniker that we talk about, right? We wouldn't have population growth if it weren't for immigrants who were settling here in Western New York. How does that factor in, you think, into the conversation we're having right now about immigration?
Certainly. I think that it's really easy to wear that title of City of Good Neighbors as a badge of honor. But what I actually think we need to do is see that as a lofty goal that we continuously need to strive towards. At Jericho Road, we try really hard to love our neighbor, and we believe that asylum seekers are our neighbors. And so it is an extreme privilege to be able to care for them and eventually work and live alongside them.
Finally, as we have this conversation and people talk about illegal immigration, asylum is a legal process. That's not to say there aren't some awful things happening at the southern border right now, illegal things, right? We talk about the cartels, the drug smuggling that is happening. How do you capture the public's attention and looking at the awful things that are happening to these asylum seekers, why they're leaving their home countries and coming here, when people are also concerned about the lawlessness that's happening at the southern border?
What I can tell you is that the fact that asylum seeking is a legal process really, I think, should assuage our fears that people are going to come here and commit crimes or bring drugs or what have you into our country. Really, it's a long process with extreme vetting and a huge burden for people to prove that they are actually in need of asylum. And so I think that the situation in place, or the laws in place, while broken, really work really hard to avoid any extra, drug smuggling or what have you actually entering the country.
As people on all sides of this issue look to Congress and the president to try to deal with the chaos that we're seeing down at the southern border. Expected to get worse now with this change. We'll continue to follow it. Catharine Grainge with Jericho Road. Thanks so much for coming in. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.